Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour you will spend anywhere online today. And we appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube as we attempt to raise your health IQ. Today's lead question: does soy cause testosterone levels to drop in men? So if you're a man and you eat tofu, does that make you less of a man? That is one of the questions that was sent into the doctor's mailbag today. And to answer that for us, we have Dr. Neal Barnard on the program. He's going to be addressing that and a whole lot of other questions that you guys have been kind enough to send in today. So we're talking about soy and testosterone. We're also going to be talking about fat. And why is it that if you take some fat out of your diet, you may feel hungry, right? So what's the science behind that? We're going to get into that. Then we're going to talk about natural fat versus artificial fat. What makes them different? Okay, we're going to talk about that. And then also we're going to hear from a woman who wrote in. She said, look, I am just super stressed for time between taking care of the kids. I've got work, I've got house duties to do, but I'm still trying to eat healthy plant-based meals. But how do I do that in a hurry? Can you please help? Well, today help is on the way. So we're going to get some tips over to her that you can use as well. But let's go ahead right now and open up that doctor's mailbag and welcome Dr. Neal Barnard to the show. Thank you so very much for being here, sir.
Hi there, Chuck. Good to see you.
And if you have a question for Dr. Barnard, you can go ahead and post that in the comments or the chat right now, or send it to me on Twitter at Chuck Carroll WLC with the hashtag Exam Room Live. Dr. Barnard, you ready for question number one, my friend?
Let's do it, Chuck.
All right. This one comes from Wendy. It's a two-parter, and the first part is really it's interesting. The men in my household, she writes, consume cruciferous veggies because they think that it increases testosterone, but they also avoid soy because they think it lowers testosterone. Is any of this true?
No. I'm sorry to break your heart. First of all, it's great they're eating their cruciferous vegetables, so you might not want to tell them that they're not going to see any big change in their testosterone level from eating them. So guys, have at the Brussels sprouts. That's great. I'm glad you're eating them. Whether it's going to have any hormonal effect, don't count on it. But the bigger issue here is soy. Soy has been the victim of Soy's really been hacked, so to speak. People have been saying all kinds of bad things about soy that really are not true. And one of the common ones is that soy will cause breast enhancement, that it will reduce testosterone, all this kind of stuff, sort of feminizing is the idea. And the verdict came in a long time ago, and it is very clear that soy products do not cause any feminization in men. They don't have an adverse effect on a man's testosterone level at all, period, really the end of it. And if you have subscribed to the idea that soy products cause man boobs. This is kind of the way it's put on, if you read the internet. Forgive me for saying this, but that's what it is. What they mean is that a guy has some breast enlargement, and they're thinking maybe that was from soy. What I always suggest that a person do to test this out is go to the beach on a hot July day. And if you see a guy who's a little heavy set and he's pulling off his shirt and you think, my, he does have some breast enhancement, go right up to him and ask him, how much tofu have you been eating this past week? And I guarantee you he will say, tofu? I don't eat tofu. What are you talking about? I eat pizza. I eat burgers. I eat grilled cheese. That's my thing. What's tofu? It's not part of my thing. Researchers have had a long time to understand what's happening. And here's what's happening. Here's where the breast enhancement comes from. As he's eating fatty foods, cheese, burgers, whatever, people who eat those foods tend to gain weight compared to people who don't. And when people eat a lot of fatty foods and they have more fat cells are not just blobs of calories. They are estrogen factories. So you got more body fat. Into each fat cell, the testosterone goes into the cell. Estrogen comes out of the cell. They convert the testosterone to estrogen. He gets breast enhancement. It's actually breast tissue, and it came from his gaining weight and having more body fat. A switch to a vegan diet, including soy, would help make all of that go away.
So let me just kind of break this down for those who aren't yet familiar. Let me see if I can ask a question that will kind of put a bow on this. When a gentleman has what you refer to as man boobs or moobs, as the kids call it, that is legitimate breast tissue, very similar to what or identical to what a woman has.
It's a mixture of fat and actual breast tissue, and yes, that's right. And in fact, some of this is normal. Particularly at puberty, you'll see a little breast tissue just because the body's going through kind of a hormonal roller coaster. And for most men, if you really look, they'll have a little tiny trace. They've got a nipple, they've got a little tiny trace of breast tissue underneath. But for some men, that gets really enhanced, and it gets enhanced by estrogens that come from their body fat.
So the more fat a man eats, the more at risk he is for developing moobs.
Well, yes, and the mechanism is that his body fat is increasing, and the body fat is the estrogen factory. Now, I should say about soy, the old-fashioned idea was that soy's isoflavones will attach to estrogen receptors and do all kinds of mischief. These myths got launched way before people realized that there are two different kinds of estrogen receptors. And soybeans don't, the isoflavones in soy, do not preferentially attach to the alpha receptors at all. They preferentially attach to the beta receptors, which you could think of as kind of the brake on a lot of these things. So soy is a good thing. It's optional, don't have to have it, but it will not make you effeminate.
Let's take a question here from Pete now. This is an interesting one. Maybe Pete is struggling with this. He wants to know what actually happens to the fat in our body when it, quote, burns off. Where does it go?
Where does your fat go? Well, your body is burning fuels all day long. If you are out for a run, there is glycogen, which is actually a big, long chain of sugar molecules in your muscles. It's in your liver. And that just dissipates because your body takes it, burns it up, and uses it for energy. Now, your fat is right behind it, meaning that your body uses the glycogen first, uses the fat second, and your body will actually, inside the fat cells, little bits of it are liberated and actually burned up just like any other fuel. They go away.
Good follow-up here. I think maybe Pete's been reading up, doing some research, wants to know also, what about the stuff that is clogging our arteries? If we switch to a plant-based diet, where does that stuff wind up going?
What we believe is happening is that your narrowed arteries, if you could look in real close detail at the artery narrowings, what you see is that the atherosclerotic plaques, which are the bumps on the insides of the artery walls that are narrowing them, they're made up of a lot of things. There's some fat there, there's some cholesterol there, and there happens to be overgrowing muscle cells there. And as time goes on, calcium comes in and makes it kind of hard, like a rock. The earlier ones, the ones that aren't all calcified, will go away. And what we think is happening is that when a person decided to go vegan, and there's no more cholesterol or animal fat in their diet, the white blood cells that clean up any kind of sort of infection or debris will start working on that area as well and clean up much of that. And it will gradually shrink down as part of that healing process.
Let's take a question now from Janie. She writes in, when coming from a 35 to 40% diet, that's 35 to 40% fat in the diet, down to all the way to just 10 to 15%, right? So she's really reducing her fat levels. Why is it that she may not be feeling quite as full, even if she's eating high starch, high fiber vegetables?
You will. Give it time. It will come. It's really a matter of the tastes that you have been habituated to. Researchers in Philadelphia did this quite a number of years ago, and where they changed the fat content of the diet. And they found that over, 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, your body accommodates to whatever the new fat level is. If it's greasy stuff, you'll come to prefer the greasy stuff. If it's very low oil, you'll come to prefer that. When I was a kid, I experienced this directly. I was about 10 years old, and my mother said, from now on, we're not having any whole milk in the house at all. She switched us to non-fat milk. We thought it was terrible. Didn't even look right. It was sort of blue, and it tasted all watery and horrible. Within a couple of weeks, we were totally used to it. And then by mistake, she bought some whole milk, and we thought it tasted like paint or like cream. So very rapidly your taste buds will accommodate to the newer level. So that's it. It's not so much a question of satiety, it's more a question of the taste buds. And give it 10 days, 2 weeks, you'll get used to it.
She kind of termed that as fat detox. Is there such a thing as actually physically or mentally detoxing off of fat?
You can think of it that way. Something physical is probably happening either in the brain or in the taste buds themselves that does cause a person to accommodate. And you see this with many things. There's a food that at first taste, you may not like it very much. You accommodate to it. And then there are other tastes that we thought we couldn't live without that we sort of forget over time. The body is really just throwing out the old habits and embracing new ones.
Let's keep chewing the fat here with a question from Adam. Writes in, I've heard of studies that claim that natural trans fats, such as those found in meat and butter, are not as harmful as the artificially made fats. But why would that be?
Don't believe it. There is a curiosity that ruminant animals do make trans fats, the same stuff that's illegal in a New York restaurant. Back in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, you would see in the fryers in restaurants a lot of sort of Crisco, you can think of it that way. These are vegetable fats that were hardened up chemically and then could be used to fry French fries or fish or whatever they threw in the fryer. The reason that they were used is partly mouthfeel, they're buttery, and also because of shelf life. And liquid oil will go rancid, but when you make them into trans fats, they last probably 2,000 years. So restaurants would use them a lot, but they raise cholesterol levels and have been banned for the most part. However, a curiosity is that a cow or other ruminant animals will make trans fats, and some of it gets into their tissues. And it's just a question of the quantity. No, they are not health food at all, and it adds to the other bad fats, the saturated fat that is also in the meat and milk.
Let's keep with cholesterol here. Question from Beth. I'm eating a whole food plant-based diet, but still struggling with cholesterol, which is over 200. She also says that her HSCRP is 0.4. Wants to know, should she be concerned? And might I add, what is HSCRP?
Yes, C-reactive protein, and the HS stands for high sensitivity. That's the way it's measured. C-reactive protein, this is a question for extra credit. It's an index of inflammation. And if a person has a really high CRP level, which you don't have, that's a sign of widespread inflammation in the body. And you'll see it with inflammatory diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or other autoimmune conditions, asthma, and many, many others. And you'll also see it come down when a person gets on a healthy anti-inflammatory diet. Now, back to your cholesterol. 200 is sort of what we think of arbitrarily as the top of a healthy level. The truth is, it'd be nice to get down towards 150. That's where you're getting pretty close to bulletproof. Not entirely, but the risk of a heart problem goes down and down and down as you go from 190 to 180, 170. But the real issue here isn't so much your total cholesterol, because total cholesterol is the sum of bad cholesterol, good cholesterol. What really matters is the bad stuff, LDL. So if your LDL or low density lipoprotein cholesterol is under 100, that's where we want to see it. If the reason your total is high is because you've got a lot of HDL, high density lipoprotein, and that's raising your levels, then we're not really going to be so worried about it. It's really the LDL. And what do? Avoid animal products completely. You're probably doing that. Keep oils really low. Avoid coconut and palm oil, and have some special effect foods, beans, soy products. They have a special, very small cholesterol lowering effect. Same thing with oats and oatmeal. So put all that together, check your cholesterol after about 8 weeks. And if it has not gone down, you can thank your parents for having given you genes that may mean that your cholesterol is going to be high kind of no matter what you do. So you're not doing terrible, but have a look at your LDL. That's really where the money's at.
We have a great mix of questions here in the mailbag today. Let's take one from Julie. Wants to know, what is the connection between fibroids and diet, and could a plant-based diet help someone who has them?
Well, fibroids, if you're dealing with fibroids, I'm sorry to hear it. Although I should say that a lot of women have fibroids that they're not aware of. They're extremely common. Most women have them. What are they? In the uterus, the womb, it's got a muscular layer, just like kind of steel belts in a tire. The muscular layer is there to give your uterus strength and to allow it to contract and so forth. Well, sometimes those muscles get a mind of their own, and they start to make little muscular knots. And it can be like a little marble in the muscle layer. And sometimes it's more of a golf ball or a tennis ball. And then they are associated with discomfort and all kinds of other issues. Smaller ones for many women, they're not even aware they're there. What's the connection with, well, first of all, there's a connection with hormones. Their growth is fueled by estrogens. And the link with diet is that diet can cause estrogens to be higher than they otherwise would be. Dairy products contain estrogens, actual estradiol, and so that we presume is a driver for them. But also, if you're not getting adequate fiber, then your body doesn't have the ability to get rid of excess estrogens. And if you're having a lot of fat from any source, that raises estrogen. So putting all this together, plant-based diet, no dairy, no added fat, lots of fiber, is going to bring your estrogen levels down a little bit. And in theory, at least, that would take the fuel off of those growing fibroids. That said, these knots take a while to form, a long time, and they probably take a long time to go away. And for many women, when they really start to shrink is way after menopause, when the body's estrogen levels really drop dramatically. All of this being said, sometimes doctors do surgery to remove fibroids if they're really getting in your way. That's an unusual thing, but it happens. You can try a diet change first and see where you go. But typically, unlike many other dietary influences, this one is pretty slow.
Let's take a question here from John. Oh my, it's a question about omega-3s. Wants to know whether cooking omega-3s, say in chia or flax seeds, will degrade the omega-3s they contain.
They're still there. They still work. Yep.
Asked and answered. Okay, fair enough. All right, Lori on Twitter. My brother has gout. Oh, that's unfortunate. I think he would be more open to talking about plant-based health, but we always get hung up when talking about beans. Can you suggest good amounts of plant-based foods that are also gout-friendly aside from beans?
Yeah, well, all of them pretty much are fine. There are 4 groups: grains, beans, vegetables, fruits. And they're all fine, including for a person who's got gout. If you were to look at observational trials of people where they've got gout or they don't have gout, beans really get a not guilty verdict. The concern here is there's a question about uric acid with beans, but when you look in real life, what actually happens is a whole lot of nothing. Gout is a disease that has been known since sort of the Middle Ages as a disease of affluence, and people on very rich, especially meaty diets, are particularly prone to gout. Beans are part of the answer, not part of the problem.
All right, we have a couple of questions about calcium. We'll start with this one from Michelle. She writes, I have osteopenia as a result of treatment for breast cancer 6 years ago. All I've been told is to do weight-bearing exercise and take a calcium supplement, but I've also heard that calcium supplements are questionable for bone health. What would you recommend for a 52-year-old woman who has a BMI of 24 and is in this situation?
Okay, so in other words, you're not overweight, you got a good weight, you're active, and it sounds like you've come through a pretty frightening diagnosis, but it sounds like you're doing well. Step 1, do stick with your doctor. Everything that we're talking about in this whole show is not a substitute for individualized medical care, and that's going to be true for you just like everybody else watching the program, because you're dealing with a number of issues. But for bone health, you do need calcium, and there is calcium in calcium supplements. If you are taking calcium supplements, I would have one important tip, and that's take them with food. Don't take them on an empty stomach. It looks like when people take just the calcium and nothing else, it can increase the risk of kidney stones. But if you take them with food, your body somehow manages to have the sort of cocktail of nutrients put together, and they, for whatever reason, don't seem to be associated. with kidney stones. Now, once you've taken the calcium, it's got to get absorbed. So that's what vitamin D is for. And so vitamin D from the sun, you're outside in 20 minutes or so, give or take, of sunlight on your hands and face is enough for most people. If you are using a sunscreen, it stops the vitamin D. If you're inside, it stops the vitamin D. If you have a lot of pigmentation, that will slow down the vitamin D as well. If you're in any of these situations, you might want to consider a vitamin D supplement. Most doctors say about 2,000 international units a day. And I like that you're exercising. That's a good idea. Give your bones a reason to live. And the more the bones are sort of worked, so to speak, whether it's running, walking, weight-bearing exercise, the more your bones respond by improving their bone density. So you can put all that together. The last thing I should just say is there's a bit of an unknown here. When people have heart disease, the atherosclerotic plaques, those narrowings in their arteries that start out like little soft bumps, it's almost like a little blister inside your artery. As time goes on, they harden up. What's happening is they are calcifying. And the question has come up, is an overly high calcium intake contributing to that process? Don't know, but some of the evidence says it might be. If that's the case, we're encouraging people to not push too hard on their calcium intake. Once you're at about 600 or 800 milligrams of calcium per day, it's pretty hard to make a case for more than that with regard to bone health, unless your doctor has you on some specific regimen for it. So have adequate calcium. I'm going to say that's about 600 or 800 milligrams a day, even though that's less than what the government typically calls for. But be guided by your own doctor's recommendations that take your own health into account.
Calcium question number 2 comes to us from Instagram, a viewer by the name of Houseblend Studio. I hear it's recommended to drink fortified plant milk for calcium because it's more bioavailable when it's fortified in the milk versus taking that supplement you were just talking about. Says, I eat greens most of the time and always eat a whole food plant-based diet. I'm 53. Do I still need more calcium?
If you're eating lots of greens, that's really nature's calcium source. That's the calcium star. I wouldn't really think beyond that if it's a big part of your diet. And you're also getting calcium and the other things that you're eating along with it, the beans and other foods like grains. Even fruits have tiny traces too. So you don't need a calcium-enhanced smoothie or something like that.
Let's see here. This one from Dan. I've had severe hay fever since childhood, and I don't consume dairy products, but I still have bad episodes. Are there any plant-based immunologists studying and or addressing hay fever with the focus on food allergies?
Oh, wow. What an important question. I'm sorry to hear that you're dealing with that. And you put your finger on exactly the issue. Most people with hay fever or other, what I'm going to call environmental allergies, it can be pollen, it can be dust, it can be your dog or your cat that you're reacting to. The proteins in all these sources can get into your body and you recognize them as foreign and you react. And one of the ways you react is with sneezing or bronchoconstriction in the lungs or all kinds of other things. And dairy products, as you've surmised, are suspect number one. Frankly, because a lot of people, when they have hay fever or have asthma and they get away from dairy, they just get dramatically better. And I would always encourage everybody to do that step right away, including if a mom or dad is listening to this and you have a child with asthma and everybody's saying, your child needs milk, your child needs milk. Don't listen to those people saying that and give your child a complete break, not just from milk, but all dairy products, including packaged foods that have dairy in them. Get that completely and see if your child doesn't get better. It is well worth a try. But there are other foods that can sometimes trigger reactions. And we've dealt with this in rheumatoid arthritis. We've dealt with it in migraines. And you can also see it with hay fever and see it with asthma. Let me refer you to a list. I wrote a book a few years ago called The Cheese Trap. Cheese, as in high protein dairy food, one of the bigger triggers. But in the appendix of that book, you'll see an elimination diet that lists the main bad guys. And it shows a fairly simple way of getting them out of diet. Let me give you the Cliff Notes version version of this. Things like corn, chocolate, potatoes, oranges, gluten, healthy for most people. But some people have a reaction to them. So we take them all out of the diet, let the person's symptoms settle down, and then bring them back in one at a time every 2 days to see which one is their trigger. And there are about a dozen, 12, 13, 14 foods like that. And many times you find 1 or 2 or 3 triggers that when you find them and avoid them, you feel dramatically better.
All right. Here's a good one from Steve. We talk a lot on the show about iodine sources. That seems to come up at least once or twice a month. So Steve is wondering whether he's getting enough iodine from sodium. Is there a rule of thumb for getting enough of one, but not too much of another? He says that he did buy some iodized sea salt as well as a pack of seaweed, but he doesn't really know how to balance them out.
Yeah. You won't know because there's no really easy way to measure it. But if you're using an iodized salt, that's fine. And now hopefully you're not using an enormous quantity of salt on things, but a little modest use of iodized salt on your foods is fine. And back in the 20s, early 20s, iodine deficiency is pretty common. And a lot of people were hypothyroid here in the United States. And 1924, the Morton Salt Company said, we're going to end this by taking their Morton salt and adding iodine to it. And almost overnight, iodine deficiency was pretty much wiped out. So it's a way of just delivering this mineral to people. But as you've pointed out, it's not the only source. Seaweed is a great source. If you had a sheet of nori, that's the one they wrap the sushi in, or some wakame. Wakame is the little strands of seaweed in your miso soup. And other seaweeds are very abundant in iodine, and a little bit will go a long way. Some people will say, well, I don't have a clue about any of that stuff. I'm just going to take an iodine pill. You can do it. Don't go too high. The recommended dietary allowance is 150 micrograms per day. That's it. Don't go higher. High levels of iodine can be a problem, just like low levels.
Let's see if we can grab a few more before we close up the doctor's mailbag for today. Here's one from Maria, writes that she has been diagnosed with Candida and is on a special diet. Wants to know, how do you recommend, Dr. Barnard, approaching the Candida diet as a vegan? What foods do you recommend and which ones should be avoided? Well, with the Candida diet, there was I think a really good guy named William Crook who wrote about Crook, C-R-O-O-K, who wrote about this a number of years ago. And he would encourage people to go low on sugar and low on refined carbohydrates. But there's a lot left in your diet. If you're trying that approach, see if it helps you. If it doesn't help you, you can skip it. But some people feel that it's helpful for them to get away from sugar. And so what does that leave? There are plenty of vegetables. If you look at broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cauliflower and kale and collards and all those things, they're not really super starchy and they're fine. But also I would encourage you to have beans, a certain amount of grains, and fruits in your diet and just see how you tolerate those things. Candida is never a reason to go back to meat or dairy products and things because that's going to cause more problems than they would solve. Carly is a cancer survivor and looking for some advice here today. She writes, I had a thyroidectomy a few years ago due to thyroid cancer, and since switching to a whole food plant-based diet, I've had family members tell me that I shouldn't be eating soy because it will interfere with my synthroid. Is soy something that I should be avoiding entirely? No, definitely not. It's a common question. What you should do is you should avoid all foods entirely for, half hour before you take your Synthroid and maybe an hour after, because the food that's in your stomach is going to stop it from being absorbed into your bloodstream. It doesn't matter if it's soy or anything. You know how some medicines it says take with food? Some say take on an empty stomach. Synthroid, empty stomach. And that's from right before to after the meal. All right, question from Joel. Next to last question. Can a vegan diet help with elevated lipoprotein A levels? Probably. This is for extra credit too, that when people go beyond their LDL, bad cholesterol, they sometimes look at lipoprotein A. And generally speaking, these things go in the same direction. So when you're getting away from meat and dairy products and eggs,
There's no cholesterol on your diet anymore. There's no animal fat. So what you're going to see is that pretty much all of the sub-fractions start coming down together.
All right, final question today comes to us from Linda, and this is one that I think a lot of people can probably relate to. She writes, I feel overburdened at home with childcare and cooking and cleaning and everything else. Could you please talk about some super simple ways to prepare healthy vegan food even without a recipe? Using some frozen and some canned food might even help. Is there an alternative, even such as ordering vegan takeout? So my goodness, she's got a whole heck of a lot on her plate and she wants to put healthy things on the plate. How can she do that?
Well, first of all, your family's lucky to have you. You're looking after them and trying to look after yourself and trying to juggle a million things. So good on you for that. Yeah, everybody handles this in their own way. And I hope you'll keep watching here at the exam room where we share lots and lots of perspectives from different people. You'll see lots of things. Also on our if you haven't downloaded our app, the 21-Day Vegan Kickstart, do that because it has a lot of tips to make it really quick and easy for you. But a couple of things. You didn't say this, but some people are cooking a meal for them and a separate meal for other family members who might not yet be quite vegan. Don't do that. Make a healthy meal for everybody. And if somebody else is not quite vegan, they can cook for themselves. What's going to happen is very quickly they're going to eat what you eat. So one thing, batch cooking is great. If you get your Instant Pot out there and you make extra of whatever it is you're cooking, you can separate out things and you can batch cook. Let's think about the different groups of foods. For example, you're getting vegetables. If you want a big time saver, is you can get a big bag of broccoli, pre-cut and frozen. And there are a variety of brands that differ in price. You can get the cheapest ones that are there. You'll see them organic, non-organic. And so you don't have to cut them. You don't really have to clean them. You just throw them in your steamer, a big, big batch. And you can batch cook that too. Put them into little individual servings, and you can have them over the next day or two. They'll last for a long time. You can do that with broccoli and Brussels sprouts and carrots and all kinds of things. With regard to beans, if you buy them canned, great, you can do it. But don't be afraid of cooking them from scratch. Why? Because you don't need to supervise them. You soak them overnight, but they'll soak themselves. You can be doing other things like sleeping while they soak, and you pour off the soaking water, fill it up again, and cook them for about an hour, but they'll cook themselves. You don't have to watch them. And you can get just from one big pot easily 6 or 8 servings of beans that you cooked up just once, ready for you to top them with salsa or whatever your topping might be. When it comes to grains, cook up a big batch of rice in the same way. And if you have never seen my special way of cooking rice, it's in just about every book I've ever written, because there's a way of making brown rice that it tastes really, really, really delicious. And I'll share that with you in a future show, or you'll see it in my book. And then, of course, fruits. You don't have to do anything with them. You buy a big bag of apples, oranges, get a whole bunch of bananas, get generous amounts of them, leave them around the house. That's the best snack for anybody that you can imagine. Last tip, if your kids are old enough to get involved in food preparation, please do involve them in it. That'll save a little time with you, for you, and will get them thinking about the healthfulness of foods. Now, when you're 4, you can't do much other than sort of tear up lettuce and things like that. But as time goes on, your kids can help out and make everybody's life easier. So those are just a few initial steps, and you'll find lots more here on the exam room.
Yeah, and I think that honestly, kids, my suspicion is anyway that they're actually going to be far more helpful in the kitchen than you realize. I remember not liking my mom's cooking at the age of 3 and starting to prepare my own meals just so I would enjoy what it was that I was eating. I love my mother, not the best cook in the world, but kids, in my opinion, Dr. Barnard, can be far more helpful in the kitchen. And I do believe that we have even had other experts on the show who have said that when a kid gets involved in the cooking process, they're more interested in the food. So suddenly those Brussels sprouts that they ordinarily would say yuck to, they're all about them.
Well, they're all about them, and also it depends a whole lot on what you put on top of them. And you take those Brussels sprouts, which any self-respecting 6-year-old child is going to go, "What's that?" But you spray it with a little Bragg's or some seasoned rice vinegar, and it turns that bitter Brussels sprout into candy. So jump in. One other thing, if a person is going vegan, don't fail to notice that the cleanup got really fast. If you're scrubbing out the old roast pan and like 45 minutes later, there's still, pre-Etruscan traces of stuff from the meat that came out of the oven. That doesn't happen on a low-fat vegan diet. You barely need to scrub anything. So your cleanup super fast and you're off to the tennis court.
I never thought about that. That is so accurate. That is so daggone accurate. I love it so much. That is a great question to end the show with. Oh my gosh. If we didn't get to your question today, have no fear. We will save it and do our best to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. And if you would like to keep on sending in those questions, no problem. We will look at those and try to get you an answer as well. Just keep on dropping those in the comments or the chat box, or send them to us on Twitter with the hashtag ExamRoomLive. Also, if you enjoyed today's show, you feel like you raised your health IQ, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to the Exam Room podcast over on Apple Podcast or wherever it is you get your favorite shows. And when you subscribe, please also leave that 5-star rating. And before we wrap up today, Dr. Barnard, I wanted to take a moment to let you know that today's episode has been brought to you by the Gregory J. Ryder Memorial Fund. Just fantastic work that Allison and the group over there are doing. They are really carrying on the love that Greg had for animals and animal rights issues and promoting veganism and just healthy living overall. And I just can't say enough about what it is that the Gregory J. Ryder Memorial Fund is doing, and certainly cannot thank them enough for the support that they have continued to show, not just to the Exam Room podcast, but to the Physicians Committee. They are just fantastic people over there.
That's for sure. Allison is doing such wonderful work, and we're so grateful for her support.
And if you get an opportunity, please do check them out online at gregoryryderfund.org. That's Gregory Ryder, REITER, fund.org. Sign up for the newsletter while you are there. And Dr. Barnard, my final question to you for today is, how excited are you about ICNM, the International Conference on Nutrition and Medicine that's coming up next week? This is maybe my favorite 3 days of the entire year.
It's going to be the biggest and best ever. We have more presenters than ever before. So doctors are all lining up, nurses, physician assistants, dietitians. You'll all get the continuing education credits that you need, but lots of other people participate too. So the International Conference on Nutrition and Medicine has been going on for many, many years now. And this is going to be a really, really cool one starting July 15th.
Yeah, let me rattle off just a couple of names. Of course, you'll be speaking there. Dr. Alan Desmond will be there. Our own Dr. Hana Kaliova, Dr. Columbus Batiste, Dr. Shireen Kassam. She was just on the show. Fantastic. Dr. Robert Osfeld, he's going to be on the show. He'll also be speaking at ICNM. Dr. Tim Key and Dr. Barnard, as you said, so many others. That's coming up July 15th through the 17th. Plenty of space is still available. It's online this year, meaning you can join us from anywhere in the world. And to register, head over to pcrm.org/ICNM, pcrm.org/ICNM. And a special offer just for Exam Room viewers. When you use the promo code EXAMROOM, one word, you will save $50 off the cost of registration. We've included all of those pertinent details in the episode notes. So go ahead and click over there and save $50 today. Save your seat and raise your health IQ like you never thought possible for 3 days, July 15th through the 17th at ICNM. Dr. Barnard, my friend, that is all the time that we have for the program today. So I want to say thank you to you one more time for being here and helping us raise our health IQ for the past half hour.
Thank you, Chuck. It's been a pleasure.
And to the crew behind the scenes that makes the magic happen, thank you guys as always. And to you, my exam roomies, thank you so very much for tuning in today, because you are the reason why we do this show. And for everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We'll talk to you again soon, but until then, keep it plant-based.